As it's Women's History Month, I begin today honoring women who were way makers. Sacagawea, the native woman who guided and supported the Lewis and Clark exploration of the Louisiana Territory, her knowledge and connection to the land were essential to keeping that exploration party safe from harm and on the right track. I love the scene in Hidden Figures when John Glenn is orbiting the Earth in Friendship 7, and there's some concern about him getting back safely, and he has some questions about that new thing, the computing, and he says, they're like, no, John, it's okay. And he's like, is the girl in the room? Because they had shown the scene before that Katherine Johnson had the capacity to demonstrate her mathematical genius with John Glenn in there, something that room full of men hadn't done. And they're like, no, dude, probably not dude, but everything's good. And he's like, is the girl in the room? And actually she recalls that he said, is she? But they all knew who she or the girl was. And they went and got Katherine Johnson, and she came and reassured John Glenn that all was well and that he would make it back based on the calculation. She is a waymaker. The shuttle program, the Sojourner Mars rover, Voyager 1 and 2, and of course the Mars rover named after another amazing woman, all were contingent upon the success of Friendship 7. Katherine Johnson and her magical mathematical mind is touching generations to come. With joy, I watched Amanda Gorman share her gift at the inauguration, knowing all the while it was another waymaker, Maya Angelou, leading and teaching us to do the best we can, and when we know better, to do better. I thought about Betty Friedan publishing The Feminine Mystique and how that sparked women's consciousness, and to understand that we were in control of our body and we had our voice meant something. And Gloria Steinem, another waymaker who is still being felt today in the fact that women are no longer valued or judged on their singleness or marriedness. You're not just Mrs. or Miss, you can be Ms. And that opened the door for other options. Women have been waymakers across generations. And making ways, straightening paths. I got inspired by the sentences in our affirmation for this month. I anchor into this knowing because the higher wisdom self within me is constantly guiding me and directing my paths, making every crooked path straight. Where that wording led me to the sacred text of the New Testament, or the sacred text of Christianity. A voice of one calling in the wilderness, prepare the way for the Lord, make straight paths for him. Every valley shall be filled in, every mountain and hill made low. The crooked roads shall become straight, the rough roads smooth, and all the people will see God's salvation. Making a way, smoothing things out, brought to me the song Waymaker. And you are a waymaker, miracle worker, promise keeper, light in the darkness. And I thought about, of course, Master Teacher Jesus, a miracle worker, that all of what he did operating through his Christ consciousness was an example, a living example to us of how we are to be in this time, in a time when the world seems to be crazy. I mean, police officer says dude had a bad day, so he shoots up a bunch of Asian Americans. Really, I've had plenty of bad days. That's what ice cream and Snicker bars and whiskey are for, right? Not, let me get a gun and kill people. Crazy. Just this state talking about letting people carry guns without license and open carry. Crazy. Governors dropping mask requirements in the midst of us just barely going forward. Crazy. But there is a saneness that comes when we look at the example of Jesus as a miracle worker, as the way maker. That there is a sanity in that example of straightening out crooked paths. And how is it done? Waymaker, miracle worker, promise keeper, light in the darkness, miracle worker. I love it. Water to wine and feeding the 5,000. That's the straight path. The crooked consciousness that had to be straightened out, or the crooked path, was there's not enough. There's not enough wine. There's not enough food. We don't have what we need. That's crooked, crazy. thinking. The straight path, sane thinking is, this little boy's lunch is plenty to feed everybody. We run out of wine at the wedding. Here, use this water. Put water in those canisters there. Best wine ever. That if a miracle needs to happen, it's fine. That's the straight way. Light in the darkness. I love it. It says that he hung out with sinners and folks who work for the IRS. So right now, Rena, better watch out. Actually, they said tax collectors. And tax collectors at that time were considered traitors because they were working for the Roman government, who was occupying that territory at the time. The straight path, the sane way of thinking, is that all are welcome. Namaskar or namaste. I see the divinity in you. So no matter what tag society has given you, Master Teacher Jesus demonstrates all are welcome. Everyone is worthy of divine love and divine connection. Light in the darkness. Today you will be with me in paradise. It's always one of my favorite of the 7 words because of all the words, that's the kookiest. Okay, this narrative has Jesus hanging between these 2 men. One is saying like, dude, if you're so magical, let's work this out and get us down from here. And the other person says, hey, don't be disrespectful. And he says, remember me when you come into your kingdom. You mean as I'm hanging here next to you being executed? But he had that divine sight. And based on that, the other guy had crooked consciousness. This guy had straight consciousness, a straight way of seeing. He had smoothed out. And Jesus says, today you will be with me in paradise. That outside circumstances don't determine the final solution. That all is well. And all things are working together for our highest good, even being executed as a criminal according to the narrative. I will see you in paradise. That is the miracle worker. That is light in the darkness. We see something very similar exemplified in the journey of Buddha. That the crooked path for Buddha was that he was a spoiled prince. He was also a real person, Prince Siddhartha. Kept inside the palace, controlled by the thinking and what other people thought was best for him, the desires for them. But one day he got out and he saw death and sickness and suffering, and it touched him. And he went on a journey looking for something bigger, better than himself. And as he came to the understanding of a oneness with the divine, of a oneness with all creation, he became enlightened, the Buddha, the enlightened one. And that is also our path, the straight path for us, the smoothed path. The crazy thinking, the sane thinking says, there is suffering and wrong things happening in this world, but it's not my path. Or it's not going to stop me on my path. Or it's not the only place I am on my path. And I can continue, even in the midst of seeing things that I don't like. People terrorizing this country, trying to take away our democracy. I will still move forward on my path of my connectedness and my oneness, and learning and expanding the truth of who I am. That even Buddha on his journey, the Prince Siddhartha on his journey to enlightenment, that suffering is a choice. Hard times happen to all of us. That's how we grow and become better people. But suffering is our choice. And that is the waymaker, the sanity that Buddha brings to the world. I close today back with nod to Women's History Month. In my AME days, there was the crooked path at one time, that women are not called to preach and would not be recognized as preachers. Now, we know that got straightened out thanks to Reverend Dr. Vashti McKenzie, the one and only my mother in the ministry, Bishop Carolyn Tyler Guidry, and Bishop Sarah Davis, who passed away. And now there are 2 other women bishops, one whose father was a bishop before, and his name just went out of my mind. But there was that crooked thinking at a time that women could not preach and will not be recognized. Well, a waymaker who straightened out that path, who disconnected from that crazy consciousness and went to a sane consciousness, she's now called Reverend Jarena Lee. They have ordained her posthumously. But when the founding bishop of the AME Church, Bishop Richard Allen, told her women could not be ordained, she left her child at his house and went to preach the gospel. We are called to be waymakers. We bring the energy of the divine to straighten out crooked consciousness. Crooked consciousness is lack of funds, lack of love, lack of acceptance, lack of time, lack of possibilities. I can't do it. I don't have the right talent, whatever. That is crazy. The sane way, our March saneness, the way that we smooth out, fill up the hills, lower the mountains, is that we come bringing the miracle waker, the way maker, the miracle way, the light in the darkness. We come living, moving, and having our being in our Christ consciousness or in our Buddhahood, in our enlightenment. I ask us this week to think about ways that we can be way makers. I wish you all a happy and gorgeous spring, and I see the divine in you. Namaste.